This is Elemental Conversations, where leadership isn't just talked about, it's tested. I'm Tyler, your host, helping you lead with your values, push through adversity, roll with change, and make bold decisions. New episodes every Monday. Subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Instagram, and if you're ready to challenge the status quo, then get ready to let the alchemy of education ignite your passion for learning.
Fire, earth, wind, water. This is the Elemental Educator, and now your host, Tyler Como.
Dr. Stephanie Van Deynze-Snell is a veterinarian hospital co-owner, and flow state coach, consultant, and speaker. After 13 years of scaling her business while navigating motherhood, she's lived the full spectrum from a young, passionate overachiever to burnout, back to health, and now thriving in true abundance. Through this journey, she discovered by necessity the foundations of sustainable success. Experiencing burnout firsthand led her to flow science, the study of how to work with our biology to perform at our best and feel great doing it. She is passionate in sharing this knowledge and supporting other leaders break through overwhelm, create more flow in their daily lives, and unlock their full potential for abundance and a life well lived. Outside of work, Stephanie is most at home in nature, spending time with family and friends, staying active, traveling, and exploring new ways of living. Stephanie, welcome to the Elemental Educator podcast. It is my pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun.
Now, I always have to ask, do you want to go Stephanie, Dr. Stephanie? I'm okay either way, but anytime we have doctors on the show, I always ask what they'd like to go by.
You can just call me Steph or Stephanie. It's great.
That's perfect. Okay, Steph, and I want to get into a big question right away, which is, how did you get to where you are now?
Oh gosh, that's a loaded question. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I always feel like I need to start this kind of question with the fact that I grew up on a dairy farm. So I have that background of working a lot, and kind of when we got into our older years and we got our licenses, that's when we could get off the farm. So we worked hard, and then we also had to play hard by necessity, I feel like. So we did a lot growing up, and then being raised the way I was, to just work hard. The play hard was something that we did, but wasn't necessarily endorsed by our parents, but we did have a lot of freedom. So I think from a young age, I was given responsibility. I was, encouraged to work hard, to just keep going, and that type of thing. So that for sure helped to shape how I showed up in kind of my early university years and that type of thing. And where it was never really a question of, do I start a business? Do I buy a business? Do I go to school? It was just like, yeah, let's do it. We can do it. I had no doubt in my mind. So that's kind of how I got to where I am now, I think, is just, kind of never saying no, right? Just, it's like, yeah, let's try it. Let's do it. I have no doubt. I know how to work hard. I know at worst case scenario, I can work my way through this. And that's kind of, been a theme in my life for sure.
I like that. And it's going to be a nice transition to one of our first segments here where we talk about the earth element and what we value. And I feel there's a value of experience coming up. But with that being said, let's get into that first segment of Grounded Moments.
3, 2, 1.
Rooted in wisdom, driven by purpose. Welcome to Grounded Moments. And Steph, to build some momentum here, we're going to play a little game first. And this game is called Principles or Preferences. So I'm going to give you a general statement, and you just have to tell me if it's a principle, which is something everybody should live by, or if it's a preference, meaning it can be a negotiable topic where not everybody has to live by it. Make sense?
Yes.
The catch is there's no time or room for explanation. It's just a quick rapid fire game. Ready to play?
Yeah, sounds fun.
Okay, so principle or preference, leaders should share mistakes just as often as wins.
Ooh, principle.
Group chats need an official no work talk after 7. You should never wear your lanyard outside of work. Office plants are non-negotiable for healthy culture.
Principle.
Every team should have an inside joke or two.
Principle.
Staff should get to vote on the next PD format.
Principle.
Let's circle back. Is leadership speak for I'm not dealing with this yet?
Principle.
Every leader should master a signature coffee order. You can't lead well if your email box is chaos.
Friend.
And new year, new mugs. You got to get face shots and do pictures again for everyone.
Oh, preference.
All right. And a quick little rapid fire game. You did great. That was quick. And we established what are the non-negotiables for you, Steph. But to translate that more to our values, what we did was decide on things that we stand for and don't really want to stand for on top of that. Now, before the show, I asked you to bring a quote on, and the one that you brought is "Nothing will work unless you do." And I'm hoping we can spend some time where you get to share where you found this quote and why you chose to bring it on the show today.
Yeah, I love that quote. And what's been interesting, I think what happens to a lot of us is, we really like to live by something, but then when we evolve and as we work through life and we start to look at it a little bit differently, and that's for sure been with that quote. So I love it because when I first saw it, I was like, yeah, we need to work hard or nothing is going to work. And that was such my mentality of, okay, just like grind, just keep going, work hard. And then when I would look at other people around me that maybe were struggling, I'm like, you just need to work harder. And it was always that kind of mentality. And it definitely got me to a certain place, but it worked until it didn't work, right? Because I did eventually, that wasn't a sustainable way to live in the long term with the pace I had set with like the kids and not sleeping and all these things. And then, and just the stress and the responsibility of then, kind of owning a business and all of that. And then I started to look at this quote once I started realizing that my, kind of whole system was starting to fail me. My brain wasn't working like it used to. And that's what happens when you get burnt out. Your brain actually starts to change and doesn't work the way it used to, which is pretty devastating for anyone that's really relied on their ability to think through things and just, to push and work through. So then I started looking at this quote. It's like, well, nothing works unless you do. So you really do need to start looking at, well, how can I actually function at my best, and like bring my best self forward? Like my, with the flow science, we even like my biological systems actually need to be working. I think a lot of us think, we have cars, we have musical instruments, and we're always looking at the components of these things and being like, oh, this needs a little tweak here, this needs oiling, like let's make sure this works well. But then, we think we don't need the same kind of attention or the same kind of knowledge about the inner workings. So then that's kind of what that quote has become to me, is still both. Like we still need to work and actually put in the effort, but it's about working smarter, instead of just harder and blind ambition. It's a little bit more about how can we work with what we have a little bit more smartly and, kind of for better effect, more impact, that kind of thing.
And it's a quote I came by a couple of years ago too, and it's really stood out to me as well because I'm similar to you in the trend of I need to work harder and harder and harder. And I do fear that what if you reach that day of burnout, or what if you reach that day of can't doing it and can't being able to do it anymore, and how do you push through that? So this idea of you need to work is so important. And what I want to know is I try to bring that into my work state and my work environment. Is there any way that you're able to bring this message to your own business, your own work environment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a couple things we've done with our work environment for sure. And I mean, this is where like when you get into, kind of like the foundational building blocks of what we need at a biological level to thrive. And the more I learn about it, then I can strengthen these things as well. But it's interesting because looking back and really noticing and reflecting on what has worked well, now I can look at it from the side of like, oh yeah, that's because that helps to support our biology, to be able to thrive. So with our workplace, I mean, very early on, we adopted flexible schedules, right? Like what actually works with your life. Let's make sure you have enough resource time during your day so that you can get on top of records, notes, research, whatever you need to do so that you can leave work on time, so that we're really protecting, that this is your shift. It's like here to here, because in the vet world, I mean, it can easily bleed into all night if you want to, or if you let it, right? So yeah, definitely flexible work schedules, working in the resource time, that full hour lunch that we hope people take, right? And we encourage people to walk outside on their lunch breaks, that kind of stuff. The other thing we do is we're pretty unapologetic about saying this is a psychologically safe workplace, and we're going to do everything we can to, honor that and try to make sure it stays like that. I mean, sometimes it's hard because obviously we're working with people coming in that aren't maybe necessarily psychologically safe within themselves, right? So then it's still encouraging and saying, look, we're going to do everything we can as a workplace to make sure that this is as psychologically safe as we can make it. Stuff like that we've really applied to the workplace. And what's funny is really anything you can apply to the workplace, you can apply to your home life. So I think sometimes people think, oh, that's a work thing, that's a home thing, but these basic principles just run across within yourself. Are you psychologically safe? In your home, are you leaning into psychologically, kind of safe environments? And then again, in the workplace, it just kind of ripples out from there.
Your story makes me think of when I was a volunteer firefighter. And one of the quotes that I was told there that really sticks with me is somebody else's emergency is not your own. And the importance of taking your time to do things even when people around you are trying to make you feel rushed, because you want to make sure that you do it the way that you've intended to do it, right? Whether you were responding to a call or deciding where you needed to spray your water, or even you jump out of the truck and start beating the fire down on a grass fire with a shovel, you had to make some very calculated decisions. And to translate that to the workplace, it sounds very similar to what you're describing when you're saying you're trying to create a psychological safe workplace, is you're making sure that other people's emergencies are not your emergencies, and that you guys are focusing on what you need to focus on with your team to do the best job you can do. Now, Steph, we played a little game to start where I asked you to pick some principles and preferences and established non-negotiables without giving you any say really whatsoever other than the answer. What is a non-negotiable that you live by? And when did it get cemented for you?
Yeah, I really believe leaders, for example, and leadership in general. I mean, what's the focus of leadership? I think it really should be like, well, what can I do to bring the light out in the people that I'm leading?
Yeah.
And I think, like, again, whenever I think about leadership, I often think of self-leadership too, because I think so much has to start from within. So in the way I'm leading myself, am I bringing the light out in myself? And I think that's sometimes a hard question to be confronted with, because it's like, oh my God, like I would never speak to people the way I speak to myself, for example. And this was me, a few years ago, realizing like, wow, I would never say what I say to myself to people I'm leading. I would never beat, my people that I'm leading up the way I beat myself up. And then it's like, wow, like that's something then that makes me feel unsafe in my body. Then, like that whole felt sense of safety, I don't have that. And then that ripples out to the people I'm leading, because there's this thing called neuroception where at a completely unconscious level, we are completely, pinging off each other. So kind of going back to your example about, like rushing people, this is my emergency, it should be your emergency. That right away just causes this like spiral of heightened, like, kind of nervous system and stress. And then no one's learning their best, no one's making the best decisions. It's a little bit harder to think, straight, think clearly, think more creatively. So like none of that is conducive then to like leading a team to the best outcomes, right? So I think that's where it kind of all kind of starts from within. So kind of a long answer for my non-negotiable, but I think, yeah, a lot of it starts from within. So really looking at yourself first, and then it more easily ripples out from there, right? The effects that you're having on others.
It's a great answer. And I love the message so much that I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit more here, Steph. Have you heard of an elevator pitch before?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I want to hear is from the message you just shared with me and pulling from the quote that you gave earlier, I want you to share with our audience in your elevator pitch, so 10 to 20 seconds, why this is something that's so important. And we're really going to try to sell them on this concept.
Okay. This I always struggle with because it's like, I feel like there's so many things to say, but okay.
That's right. You can just go whenever you're ready.
All right. So when we're looking at leadership, we need to really recognize that it starts within ourselves and that it ripples out from that standpoint. So we can't have the effect that we want to have on others if we're not having that effect within ourselves. And it really comes down to having that felt sense of safety within yourself and really understanding how you're working so that you can have more compassion for how others are operating and why they're showing up the way they are. I don't know if
that was super good. Have you ever read The Ripple Effect?
No, I haven't, but I feel
it's
like
by
I
Dr.
should.
Greg Wells, and similar. He's a neuro scientist who studies the brain, and he'll be on the show in a few episodes after yours comes out as well. Very, very compelling. When you just mentioned the word "the ripple" of it, it made me think of his book because it's very similar to what we're talking about, to what's in his message as well. Now, With having to find things within yourself, you are going to have a lot of internal conflict and a lot of internal things you have to persevere through. And that's going to bring up the adversity piece, which is actually going to bring us to our air element when we unpack that adversity in headwinds and tailwinds. Through storms and surges, discover the lessons from headwinds and tailwinds, where we focus on the challenges that test us and the forces that help us move forward. Steph, can you share a moment of adversity you have faced? And what's a moment where you were this close to giving up but didn't?
Yeah, I sometimes tell this story because I think it just kind of it's real for a lot of people. So it was, yeah, kind of like the summer of 2019 is when I remember, I had just had my third child. I was putting him down for a nap. I was nursing him, sitting in the rocking chair. It was like a really nice summer day. And I remember just being like, wow, the business is running next door. I think it was a Saturday. It's making money while I'm here with my beautiful child. I have another couple healthy children, and I was just really numb. I was like, wow. Instead of being happy and feeling like, I just felt so numb, and I felt like I just want to run away. I don't want to do this anymore. Like, what is going on? And then just really recognizing I had felt like that for a while, trying to push through, trying to work on mindset work. It was all these different things I had really because I had wanted to feel better and wanted to enjoy where I'd gotten, but it was definitely this feeling of like, I gotta do something different. And because I was at that point where I was like, I just want to run away. I don't really want to live and I was like, this isn't me at all. Like I was always kind of excited about life. I like to have fun. I was always interested in learning, but I had just lost all of that. And I think after however many years that was, probably 8 years of just high stress with the business, not really sleeping enough with the kids, putting so much pressure on myself, really internally beating myself up a lot about, well, I just need to work harder. Like, I'm just not doing good enough. I just need to work harder. I need to try harder. Just like push all the time. That was kind of a really low point for me where I knew I had to do something differently. Like I was missing something. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Was there a turning point, Steph, where, things started to shift? Was that like a moment of clarity, someone's support, a new strategy?
You know what I think is so funny about my story is that was, the summer of 2019. And I had already felt pretty crummy, like increasingly burnt out. And then I lived like that for another 3 years. And I think this is where that story, I think, will resonate with a lot of people. Like, we know we're not okay, but we're just so stuck. And this is where I started really realizing, like, oh my God, like I'm just like stuck in this, and I'm annoyed with myself. Like I can hear these negative thoughts swirling, and I engage with them, and then I feel super crappy about myself, and then I show up at work and I'm smiling, and I'm like, oh, is everyone else doing okay? And then I go home and I'm just like, oh God, and it's just like this complete face you put on just to look okay when you're really not okay on the inside. And yeah, so I went on like that for a few more years, and I had started to confide in my professional coach with some of these things. And there was this moment, because I was talking about how I wanted to get out of the management that I was doing with the vet clinic, because like I had worked myself into that position just by necessity, right? Like it was my business, someone needed to lead, someone needed to manage, but it's not my preference. Like I like to be more of like the innovator, the visionary. I don't like to run meetings and that type of thing. And she kind of, she said to me one day, because we were going through some stuff at work, and I was like, well, it's fine. I'll just do this, I'll do that. And she's like, Steph, like, listen to yourself. And I was like, what do you? She's like, do you really want to wake up for the rest of your life trying to convince yourself this is fine? And this is what and I started crying. And I was like, no, like that is not how I want to live. She's like, you've been talking about this for years. She's like, you need to do it. Like you need to leave this position and, do what you actually like to do. And I get emotional even thinking about it now, because it was that moment where, like, when you are so stuck like that, like you need someone to kind of be like, wake up, like listen to yourself, And I think even in that moment, the only reason, looking back, that I think I finally did make the changes is that my other two co-owners were on that call with us, and them witnessing that whole display of her saying that and being like, you've been talking about this for years, Steph. And then like me breaking down, and just it being so obvious that was something, that like I was just having a hard time confronting, but it was so necessary. There was no turning back. Like there wasn't the ability for me to be like, oh no, actually I'm fine, because they're like, you're obviously not, you know. So I find it very interesting how stuck we can be, how much embarrassment and shame and all of these things that can just build up inside of us, and we hold it so close to us, like no one can see this. Like there's nothing worse than someone knowing that I'm not okay. But then, yeah, so I hope by sharing it, it resonates with people, and it's like, it's completely okay to change your mind. It's completely okay to, what was fine is no longer fine, and yes, that was fun for me, a few years ago, but now it's not okay. And I think that's the thing, like, let's normalize just like speaking our truth and being vulnerable, but all of that is scary as well. So I think that was the turning point for me. But I find it interesting because there was a lot that did come from within, but I did need that external like shaking and to finally confront and make the changes. And they were scary, but it's, yeah, it had to be done. And I'm so glad now. Like that's the thing. And that's why I hope speaking about this, from the other side, absolutely, I'm so glad I did it, but it was really uncomfortable.
And I'm glad it worked out too. And hearing that story makes me always think, to the power that time really has. And whenever I felt really stuck and it wasn't like, I felt like I had to do something, it was usually because, well, I've been doing it for so long and the commitment we've put into it, and to leave that, like, that's a very difficult thing to come to terms with because people don't fully grasp the concept of time, right? And so when we get that idea of, spent years or hours doing something to shift and do something else, there's that, like you mentioned, that feeling of guilt, that feeling of shame, that feeling of embarrassment, because you feel like you're abandoning something. Because people often associate things like their job or, things that aren't actually who they are and what they value with things that are their values, right? Like they become what they do, right? And it's such an interesting conversation to hear and to listen to your story inside of it. Steph, everyone needs an anchor to stay grounded during that adversity. What was yours? What gave you that wind at your back when you needed it the most?
Yeah, I think when I started understanding actually what was happening at a biological level and, kind of inside of me, that gave me enough, I think, just knowledge. And really, knowledge is power, because once you're aware of what's happening, it's just like laid out in front. Like it just really illuminates things, and it's that much harder to go back into the bad habits. That much harder to be like, oh no, I'm fine, when it's, what's happening at a biological level. So like when we're talking about this and saying like, okay, that's my identity, like that is such a mental construct that our brains make us do, because our brains want us to feel safe. It wants to be like, okay, this is the box we're living in. Okay, that's great. But then it's like, no, you got to stay in this box. And that's what the brain does to us, because that's what it knows to be safe. And that's our whole survival biology is like just keeping us safe and alive, right? Like that's how we evolved. And whenever we're looking at what's uncomfortable in our life, that it's because it is, in one way or another challenging that survival biology. So it's always like, well, what's not safe about me changing? And then it's like, oh, okay, that's what my survival biology is saying, this isn't safe. So then that's where you need to bring in your biology to thrive, which is making those changes and working with that and really understanding like, okay, this is what's happening in my brain. This is going to be really uncomfortable because it is threatening my survival biology and these mental constructs and the boxes that my brain has created to be like, you need to stay in this box to be safe. So that really helped me just move through. And things like understanding my dopamine system, like, oh wow, like I'm moving towards these things when I'm uncomfortable, but I can actually use my dopamine system in this way to actually help me, or yeah, kind of really all the bad habits we have. For me, like the shame and like starting to actually approach health from like a holistic way, because I worked so much on my mindset, but I didn't ever deal with emotions, so it's all these different things where it's like understanding what you actually need to feel safe, and then like with lower stress, and then like starting to move from there, because it's really hard to grow otherwise, I find, because like we just always want to seek what's comfortable by default.
Yeah. It's such a fascinating topic to me, because 50, 100, 500 years ago, it was a lot easier in a sense to be psychologically safe and to feel that okay, because they didn't have the exposure that people have now. And the problem with the brain is it stores memory, right? And it can hold things. And so from a young age, people are exposed to all of these horrible things that can happen in the world because we can be connected now. So that brain that wants to keep you safe, when all of a sudden something becomes real for you, or, something seems very sudden, your brain will pull from all of the memories that it can remember to pull from to say, this is why you shouldn't do this, right?
Yeah.
And you have to come up with the counter argument of, this is why I should do this. And it's a constant fight. And with like I said here, the growing technology, the growing access to what's out there in the world, it just gives more reasons for your brain to say, hey, that's not safe. And that fight is getting harder and harder to make onto why things are, because there's more exposures to those that level of unsafeness. So I do have to ask, Steph, for people facing their own headwinds, or where their brain is pushing back and saying not safe, what's something they can do to keep moving forward?
Oh God, look at the problem. Like, when you notice yourself starting to zoom or spiral, or like, oh, kind of doom scroll, whatever it is, just recognize like, whoa, I need to go and do something for my nervous system, bring it back into a relaxed state. And we don't do that nearly enough. And that's also a huge part about completing a stress cycle, which people aren't even educated in what a stress cycle is, and how to make sure we're completing that on at least a daily basis. And then that's where we get into chronic stress, and it's the whole thing. So that's the first thing I think that is one of the most important things I've learned is really be intentional about like tending to your nervous system, because everything goes better when you're in a more relaxed state. And like, you can jump into a stress state. Like, stress isn't meant to be bad. It's supposed to help us focus. It's supposed to help us learn. It really activates neuroplasticity in our brain and learning. Like, it's actually supposed to be good for us, but it's not meant, to linger. Like, we're not meant to live in that state. We need to be intentional about coming back into a parasympathetic, into a relaxed state. That's the first thing, because it is really hard to properly solve problems, or to really overcome adversity, or to make those uncomfortable decisions, those uncomfortable steps, and to take action when we're in a heightened state. So that would be the first thing I think that most of us are missing.
Nothing works unless you do, right? Bring it back to that, bring it back to the quote. And, with that idea of recognizing and now taking action, we're bringing about change, and we're starting to bring in change. And that's where the water element comes in, which is about the changes that we take on, the changes we embrace. And that's going to bring us to our next segment of Ripples of Change. Small shifts, big waves. This is Ripples of Change, where we dive into the power of embracing change and making waves that last. And Steph, we are going to play a slightly different game here, where it's called Here's the Trick. So I'm going to read a question out, and what I need from you is some pieces of advice that actually work to help answer the question here, okay?
Okay.
So you're dealing with a know-it-all teammate. How do you navigate that?
Usually asking questions. They're trying to be seen. They're trying to be heard, because maybe that's what's going to help them feel safe. So it's definitely like, hey, I'm noticing this. What do you want it to, to kind of get across in there? And I think it's just asking the questions back and giving them that little bit of like what they're needing in that moment to help move past, right? So yeah, that would be what I would do.
You want to turn around a disengaged group. What do you do?
On why, like, what's the purpose of us being here? That really triggers that sense of autonomy and helps trigger the biology brings the heart back into it, which is something, again, I think we miss a lot of the time. But bringing the heart back in whenever you can is going to engage people. And
you're the leader, and you walk into a room with tension in the air.
One of the things I like doing is, what's happening? And if people start, it's like, well, we don't do that here. Let's actually, get to the bottom of what's actually happening. And zooming out before you zoom in is a big thing. So it's like, what's happening, and then you can kind of then narrow in on what's actually happening.
I like that.
My approach.
I like that. That's great. Steph, what's a recent change that you've embraced or led? And was it something you expected or something that took you by surprise?
thinking that this is all. So yeah, that's been something, leaning into that and starting to talk to people about it and seeing the effect on people. That's been really rewarding. But again, it's a little bit uncomfortable because it makes people uncomfortable. Because as soon as people do recognize, oh my God, I have a heart and I've been ignoring it. The grief, it's like a floodgate of grief of all the times, all the years that have gone by where, they've been living just from here up, maybe numb, to a lot of what's been going on below below the neck. So, but yeah, it's definitely an important element that people need to work through if they really want to live a whole life, right?
For sure. And implementing change often comes down to two key moments: that first step you take and the final move to make it stick. So when you're working with somebody and you're trying to teach them, about, hey, there's more than just below than your brain and your head. There's this heart. What's the first step you take? And then maybe for yourself, what was the final move that that you've taken to try to make this stick and last?
Yeah. So I think it's always important to start, of course, with doing what you can to come into a relaxed state, because from that relaxed state, that's where we can tap into our vision. And when we talk about vision and, what do you want for an ideal future? Like, you need to bring your heart into that too, and your head, right? But it's a combination. It's a joint effort, I'll say, because even your gut, right? Like your gut instincts, sometimes we just want something and like we don't know why, and that's okay. But that's what's true for you, right? So it's that bringing into a relaxed state and then doing that vision casting from a whole body approach. And then from there, that vision, then it's like, okay, now let's look at what's your reality now. And then where can we, make these changes? Because for sure, to cement any kind of change, people have to come to that conclusion themselves. Like, you can't be like, you should do, that's one of my mentors always said, they're like, stop shitting on people.
Yeah, I love that one. Yeah.
So it's definitely, like helping people change through the power of visioning what they really want. And then it's pretty apparent what they need to do. That first step of like bringing them into a relaxed state where they can, and like a safe place where they can actually access those areas of their heart, their gut, their mind, right? Where it's like, oh my God, yeah, this is actually what I want. And then looking at their current situation, they start to see, oh, this is what I need to do. And then just supporting them with, a lot of, again, love, safety, space, as much as you can to help them make that change for themselves.
And, your message ties heavily to actually what I preach on when I talk about the earth element and our core values. And what I try to establish by that is getting your brain to connect with your body and figure out who you are and what it is you bring to the table. When we scrap aside it is everything else that defines you that isn't you, who are you? And then when you make decisions, they need to come from those value-driven decisions, right? Because when you make those decisions based off of what you value, then you know that you're never going to regret that decision because it's coming from a place that you stand by and it's your non-negotiable. But if you start to make those decisions and create your values from superficial things, then you're going to see regret later on some of those decisions because they didn't come from that place of value. So what you're saying resonates very similarly to what I'm saying. I'm wondering if you see that connection as well.
I think even bringing it back, like, based on extrinsic motivation, thinks we should do whole system. We know that that's wrong for us, but we need to bring that into awareness through things like doing visionary practices. Because I think when we start running on, kind of extrinsic motivation, the alignment isn't there. It's impossible to get into any kind of flow state because your brain's like, this is bullshit. This is not actually what we want. And then it's a biological need to operate from your truth, like your values. What do you really want to do in life? And get your mind, your brain, your heart, your gut, like in alignment. And then from that place, we have a lot more effect, a lot more resonance to the people around us because we feel safe within ourselves. And then, like you said, like the ripple effects, right? So understanding what's actually happening and that you need that alignment. You need the intrinsic motivation of what's actually true for you, and that's coming out. Like that's the way we're going to actually have the outcomes that we want to see in the world, not by doing what everyone else thinks we should do.
And from the values to the adversity to the changes that we make, rooting it back to the values, we're ready to make some big, bold decisions. And that's going to bring us to our final segment, the fire segment on spark or burn. Ignite your ideas, face the flames. This is Spark or Burn, where we talk about bold decisions, big risks, and the fires that either spark success or burn lessons into our memories. And Steph, this is our last elemental segment, so it is our last elemental game. Just like principles and preferences, this is a rapid fire one. This game is called Final Answer. There's one choice between two options, no regrets. We just have to lock in a this or that, okay?
Love it. So
team spirit or team structure?
Spirit.
Sticky notes or whiteboard markers? Calling in sick or pushing through?
Pushing through.
Being liked or being trusted?
Being trusted.
Personal office or shared workspace?
Personal office.
Public shoutouts or private thank yous?
Public shoutouts for sure.
Friday off or Monday off?
Monday off.
Conflict head on or conflict in writing?
It's on the person. Oh man, that's hard. Head
Both.
on.
Depends.
Both.
Starting strong or finishing strong?
Finishing strong.
PowerPoint with flair or no slides at all?
PowerPoint with flair.
All right. And there's some final answers. They're locked in. We have to live with them. I think we will still be okay after everything's said and done. Now, Steph, just to kind of get us into bold decisions here, what is one of the wildest yeses you've ever said? And then what happened next?
Oh gosh. So I feel like just recently, the first thing that comes to mind, so I'm actually working with a group of people under Stephen Kotler. I'm not sure if you know who Stephen Kotler is, but he's an author. He's one of the co-founders of the Flow Research Collective, and he's authored, I don't know, something like 18 books, and he's incredible when it comes to flow science. So I had the opportunity to join his new mastermind group. It's kind of like a think tank group, and I said yes to that. And it's been incredible. I'm in the first month of it, but already the perspective it's unlocking and just the knowledge around, again, like what we need at a biological level, which I find so interesting because it's really often not what our mental brain can make sense of. It's like, oh no, you need to draw for 15 minutes a day. It's like what? I'm so busy. I don't have time to draw for 15 minutes a day. It's like, no, this is what your biology needs. And it's so true. Like watching to see how well this stuff works when, again, it doesn't always make sense to your brain. Yeah, so it's been awesome so far, and I'm excited to see what else I learned, because I think it's putting yourself in rooms where you're kind of afraid and like you feel like a huge underdog has always been fun for me. So that's been something lately that I've said yes to that's been really, really good so far.
You know, Steph, one of the things that I love to do is everything that my kid wants to do, because their biological world and what they decided, what they want and what they need is so spot on to what they need at that moment, where my kid will look at me and just say, I want to play with Play-Doh now. And I say, okay, we're going to play with Play-Doh now. And, sometimes it's what I need to do. And not that I play with it at work or anything, but it's that reset. It's that mental break. It's that focus on yourself, have some fun, disconnect, enjoy, and just, get to physically manipulate something. Or I'm going to color now, or we're going to do this, or let's go for a walk, right? And they know exactly what they need to do, and they still find time to learn in between. So it's always cool to see how at least my kids function and operate around that.
They learn faster because they do it, because it's actually a part of the learning process. And I think that's what we forget. They know how to flow. Like we are completely born knowing how to flow. Like no one flows more than a kid. So it's like, why aren't we looking at kids and being like, oh yeah, look, now all of a sudden they need to spin in, 50 circles. Like my son is a spinner, and all of a sudden he's spinning. And I'm like, oh, okay, he must need that. And I'm like, oh, maybe I need to spin more. Maybe I need to throw my body around more again. It's remembering a lot of what we've been conditioned to forget. Yeah, because no one learns faster than a kid. No one is, kind of flows more than a kid, is more in the present moment. There's so much to learn from them. Just watch them. So I love that you do that. Yeah, let them lead the way.
It's so interesting to me to try to pinpoint at what point does structure, I mean, it's from birth, but when does structure start to take over the flow, right? Because we go even from, I look at the way they play now and I look at, the gym classes that we praise and are so good from, the programs of studies we put in education. They're very different from how kids play even at recess time to what's expected of them to do in a gym class. And the structure behind all of it. And, adults say, I just need to spin, but instead of spinning, they go to the gym and they'll run for 15 minutes or lift weights. And those are still very important and good releases for people, but it's sometimes not exactly what everybody needs. And so it's interesting. My brain goes down this big rabbit hole around that of where did structure take over from flow. And so it's something that I'll always ponder. Now, Steph, I want to ask this, and we kind of talked about a response that you gave earlier, and I want to see if either we're going to come back to the same one or go to a different one, but can you share a story where your passion totally took over for better or for worse?
Creating a place when I got to this point where I would give anything for my team, to the point where I gave myself, right? It was a total martyrdom. I was a martyr, like, for sure. I was martyring myself. I was giving more than I had to give because I cared so much about how they were feeling. And I wanted the clients to have a good experience. I wanted to do this for everyone else. And then I, kind of let myself get completely burnt out by that. So that would be for sure something that I did to myself because I was just so passionate about what I was doing.
Now, bold decisions, these big risks, they can be intimidating, but that idea of pushing your brain out of what it thinks is just that safety box and trying something to do something new. How can we get the listeners to test that and to build that ability to do that?
Yeah, I think it's small baby steps, right? Because you want to stay within that window of not getting overwhelmed. Because as soon as you get overwhelmed, then you flip into a state where you're not going to be able to make changes readily. So it's always coming back to relaxation, envisioning what you truly want for the future, and then just, okay, what's one small thing I can do today? And maybe it just starts with awareness, right? Maybe it just starts with like, oh, I was really uncomfortable there and I started doom scrolling. It's like, oh, okay, like that's what I go to when I'm uncomfortable. That's my dopamine hit. And it's just like being aware of what are your like coming off of autopilot and being like, what are the habits that are actually hurting me, not helping me? And then it's awareness. And then from awareness, understanding that there's, it is somehow rooted in a behavior that helped to make you feel safe at some point. So just understanding that, lots of self-compassion, because it's like nothing's wrong with you. There's just something happening at a biological level. Like our whole biology is actually meant to keep us safe and alive, and it's actually a very beautiful thing. So it's like using these things that we do as, kind of information and looking at it from, kind of that open awareness and like a witnessing standpoint of oh, this is why that's happening. And then you start to have more compassion for others too, because you notice we all do the same thing, it just looks a little bit different. Yeah, like it just completely comes out sideways a little bit differently in all the people around us. So I think that's what's so beautiful about understanding your biology is you recognize the same in everyone else too, and we're all just doing our best.
I like the repeated why. And so whenever you have that urge to do something or you're thinking something's a risk, you have to ask yourself at least 5 times and go to 5 levels of why. Why did I think that? Why did I think that? Why did I think that? Okay, why did I think that? And I think I missed one. So one more why after that. But the idea is you start to get down in and unpack what it is that the issue is. What's the root of what is either causing me to be fearful of what it is that I'm wanting to do, or what is it that I'm wanting to do that I don't know why I want to do it, right? And so it's starting to get that understanding. So I appreciate the insight and thank you for sharing it. Yeah, now,
when your nervous system is.
Yeah, I totally agree. Now, I'm just getting ready for our last segment here. This is listeners' questions where we've asked the audience and now we're going to do our best to answer here. And so I'm pulling up just my social media to see what needs to go on here. There's a couple questions that have come our way for us on the show. And so what I would like to know here, Steph. Well, not me, but this is from an Instagram story where I just said we have a guest coming on the show. What questions do we have? They wrote, I'm curious, how do you actually create space for flow when your day is packed with work, family, and just life?
Engaging with your family. It is doing work that aligns with your heart and soul. That's all part of flow, but the main thing people miss is more active recovery. So that recovery piece of flow that allows you then to work at your best and best engage with your families is really understanding that at a biological level, you do your best in those other areas when you can also take the time to properly tend to your nervous system, come back into a relaxed state, do things with your hands. Stuff like that is going to help to solidify learning, memory, help you stay present, and all these things that then, the ripple effect that has on your family and your work life too. So I think it's, yes, definitely just recognizing it at a biological level, the things that you need to get into more and more flow helps. And then you can squeeze a lot of that just into a work day. You can squeeze a lot of that into your family time, like with your kids, like you were saying, Tyler, like just that's flow right there. Flow with your kids. That's like the most fun that you can have. And the more you flow, the more you flow. So never feel guilty about getting into flow, doing things you love, like whether it's with your kids, playing a musical instrument, playing sports, that starts to wire your brain for flow. And then when you're at work, you get more flow too. So it's the more you flow, the more you flow.
And I just saw the other day, it was, I think, an article that talked about, for people with kids or people with busy lives, when your day starts to wind down, people will intentionally stay up that extra hour to 3 hours because they think that that's time to themselves. But that time to yourselves, you need to go to sleep and you need to rest and reset and take that time to actually charge yourself to get back to a good state. And I fall guilty of it all the time. My kids will go to sleep at the end of the day and I'll say, oh, this is so nice. I get a little bit of time to myself now. And next thing I know, I'm up for an extra 2 to 3 hours and exhausted the next day, wondering, why didn't I go to sleep earlier? Right. So it's a tricky mess and a tricky balance between really trying to find that state and when also just acknowledging we don't sleep enough.
Yeah, we don't and sleep is so important because again, a felt sense of safety in your body comes from a well-rested state. Your nervous system needs it. And I think too, when we're thinking about our kids and family, I always say this, it's instead of saying, oh, I'm too busy because I have my kids, do it for the kids, and actually model to them what it looks like to really take care of yourself and then be able to show up fully present for them and right and to really learn how to balance all these things in your life. I always think we need to think about actually doing it because of our kids, not we can't do it because of our kids, so I think it's always going back to that too, because they deserve you at your best,
That's totally right.
So yeah.
Yep. Okay, last one here that I'll bring up again. This one just says, how do you stay focused when your day is totally chaotic?
Yeah. So again, there's so many, just a biological checklist. There's kind of the 4 main things you need to do. So you need to make sure that your nervous system is tended to. It's a lot easier to stay focused when your stress cycles are being completed and you're not in chronic stress. Because again, if you're in chronic stress, then you're always scanning. It's a lot harder to stay focused on one thing. So that's one thing. Your stress management is huge. The second thing is always look at your mental load. The cognitive load is huge. So basically, yeah, as often as you can, do your brain dump. And there is something wired with your brain from your hand. So if you can physically write out everything that's on your mind, making sure that you have, I need to pick up the laundry later, I need to do that, everything in your day that is, having any kind of mental space, do a dump of that on paper or, whatever. But, and then the third one is having that alignment. So it's way easier to focus and get your brain on board with focusing when you're actually doing something that you care about. So make sure that what you're wanting to focus on is something that you truly care about, it aligns with your values. Again, that's a biological necessity for your brain to be able to be oh yeah, I can get on board with this. Because if if it knows you actually don't care about it, it's like, no, I'm not like, I actually don't care. I'm not going to help you here. I'm not going to help you focus. And then the third one is actually having like clear goals. It's hard to stay focused when everything's everywhere. So basically giving that containment again to your brain and to your system to be like, okay, this is what we're going to flow through, is huge. So when we're looking at, larger goals that we might have, like chunk that down and really look at day-to-day goals at being like, okay, like what's the challenge at hand, and do I have the skills to accomplish this, whatever's in front of me, this challenge. And you're always looking for a little bit more of a challenge just to get excited about, because again, your brain is going to focus on things that are a little bit more exciting because it needs a little bit of healthy fear. So that's the fourth one, is like actually getting these like clear, doable goals down that excite you. Because again, if you're super bored, you're just like, your brain's like, I'm not paying attention to this. And then again, if you're like too challenged, you go into, kind of an anxiety mode, and you're not in a flow zone. So there's this flow zone that happens between anxiety and boredom, that you're just looking to, really set your goals within that flow zone and being very intentional about that. So those are kind of the four main things that really help with focus in a, kind of day-to-day life.
Thank you for sharing. And I want to know, what's next for you, Steph?
Yeah, so right now we're expanding Central Vet is one of the things. So that whole thing. So we're adding a second clinic at some point next year. So we're in the middle of doing that. So that's that side of things. So I'm very happy now as one of the co-owners and just kind of able to really focus on vision and stuff and help with those expansion plans. And then I'm also bringing in this flow program into the vet clinic. And I'm also kind of working on this Flow 101 for people as well. And it really is about really understanding like what's happening at that level of our biology so that we can get unstuck, be really strong self-leaders, and really lean into our biology to thrive and to flow. Because that's ultimately what I want to see in everything I do. It's like, how can I help people be their best selves just so they can really feel fully alive, and the ripple effects that has on everyone around us and the work that we do. So that's my focus right now, are those things work-wise, and then just really continuing to learn and apply all of this to myself and embody it all, because I think that's really, really important for me too. It's like, I obviously don't want to preach what I don't practice. So I'm just continuing to lean into a lot of these things and kind of really figuring out what works best for me so I can keep showing up as my best self, right? So I think it's important.
Well, first, congratulations. That's really exciting moving forward, and lots of great things on the go. Steph, if the alchemists listening want to get in touch with you, follow you, see what you're all about, how can they get it? How can they connect? Yeah,
so right now I'm mostly just on Instagram, the website coming soon, but right now, mostly just on Instagram at Dr. Steph V. And then that's where I'm right now posting some events that I have coming up too. I'm speaking at an event actually in Calgary this fall, for example. And so that's where I post most of that stuff, and I share some of these things, and website coming soon. But it's all in the works.
Right on. And alchemists, make sure you check out the show notes and description of this show for a full link to all of Steph's social media handles, email contacts, any way to get a hold of her that she'll allow it. We'll make sure that we can get that out there for you guys. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to connect, collaborate, and empower us all through your lived experiences.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for sticking around to the end of the show. If you have feedback, a suggestion, or just want to start a conversation, fire off an email to me, Tyler at elementaleducator.com. I actually read them. And if this episode sparked something, leave a review on Apple or Spotify. It helps more leaders find the show. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, where I put out additional content. I'll see you next time, same place.